So today I'm going to talk to you about two things, Storybook and NX, and how you can add Storybook with your app to your app with the help of NX. A few things about myself quickly. I'm a software engineer at Narwhal, and I'm a core team member of NX, and I'll explain what NX is for those who don't know what it is. I'm also the co-founder of the Angular Athens meetup. I'm also a GD for Angular, Web Technologies, and the Google Maps platform. I'm a speaker, an instructor, a mentor. I mentor women who want to get into technology or who are already in technology. And I'm also a cat person, and I climb mountains. That's me at the top of Greece. So today, as I said, we'll talk about Storybook and NX. Summary, what is Storybook? Why use Storybook? How Storybook works? What is NX? Then we'll see how NX helps with Storybook development. And then we'll see a little demo, which today I'm going to do live. I don't usually do live demos, I usually record them, but today will be a special day. So let's see, what is Storybook? Oh, wait, let me set my timer because I tend to forget and just go on and speak. Okay, here's my timer. So what is Storybook? If you go to their website, you will read the definition of it. It's an open source tool for developing UI components in isolation. Well, thank you very much. What is that? So with Storybook, you create a story for a component where you import the component and write or describe various scenarios or use cases for it. What does this mean? It may sound like an E2E test. So you create a small file, which is called a story. You import your components and you write a few different use cases, I said, which will use your component. So this is called a story. And it integrates with most front-end frameworks, including React, Vue, Angular, and Svelte. But I'm not sure you all understood well what it is. So let's see first an example of how a storybook looks like, and then we will get into more details so that all of you will perfectly understand what it is. So if you go to this site here, to their Storybook site, and you will see some live examples. If we go to the Guardian's Storybook, for example, what is it? It will be, so how the concept behind Storybook is that an organization or an application will create, wait, let's find something else. Let's find a drop down. Will create a list, sort of a catalog of their components and their UI libraries, so that it will be able to be reused among their teams, their various teams. And the cool thing about that is that they can add various components in it, and these various components, they will be able to be launched independently. And if we browse this, we can see, for example, what a drop-down looks like. So if I, for example, if I'm a developer, oops, I don't know why I got a 404. If I'm a developer at Guardian, for example, and I want to develop a new feature, someone from the team will send me this link, which will have all the catalog of the elements that I have available. And I can go here and I can see the navigation, and we will see how you will be able to also change some colors and see how it works. So more or less, it's a tool for creating a catalog of your components, but your components live isolated from the rest of your application. But let's see some more to make it a bit more clear. Why would someone use Storybook? First of all, as I said, you can develop entire UIs without needing to start up a complex dev stack. So imagine a scenario where you have say an input field in a form, and the form has various pages, and that input field is at the third page of your form, and you want to see some changes in the styles of that input field from validation, and you have multiple validations. So if you normally, if you would want to test all these various stages, you would have to fire up your application and then fire up your server and then start putting data in the form. And you put data in the first page of the form, the data is not correct. You cannot go to the second page, you go back, you fix the data, you go to the second page, you go to the third page, you finally arrive to that small input field that you want to test. You don't like the UI of the, you don't like the styles of it, you change the styles, sorry. Okay. You change the style of it and you have to refresh your application and start over. And I guess this is very tiring for somebody to do, and it's very frustrating. So with Storybook, you can just take that input field, that small component of that input field, add it in the Storybook environment. And when you just have to launch Storybook's local server, and it will show up, and it will have this simple field, and you will be able to change the styles and see it change live without starting to fire up your whole dev stack to see it. Also, it can serve, as we saw, as a documentation for your UI library or system, which is, again, very, very useful. If you work in a large organization and you're handed the task, you can go and see your UI library, your UI system, and you can also grab a few UI components, see how they look, see how their different stages look. Also, you can create your component library, as I said. Also, you can rely on your tests and write a little less unit tests. You can also, as I said, easily browse or trigger different states, and you can do visual testing too, which is all very nice, right? And you would use Storybook for that. So how does Storybook work? Because I know I've explained all that, but I haven't said how it works. So if you're just using Storybook with the Storybook CLI, it has a CLI, you just do npx sb Storybook init. And what this will do, it will, so say you have a React or an Angular application and you run this command, it will install all the required dependencies, like it will install the Storybook packages and any other things that Storybook needs. It will set up the necessary scripts to run and build Storybook, and it will add the default Storybook configuration. And it will add some boilerplate stories to get you started, right? Some default stories. The step 2 is you just set a story file right next to your component file. You import your component and start drafting out scenarios. So let's see how this looks. In an example React layout or an Angular layout, you would have your test components or your TSX file. Then you would have your test files, your CSS files. So just like that, you just add a .stories.tsx file. The same thing goes with Angular. You have your spec file, your HTML, your CSS, and your .stories.ts file. So in our example that we're going to see today, you would have, and this is from an NX workspace, which we'll see eventually. You will have your button, for example, because you have a custom button that you want to build, and then you will have the test, the CSS, and then the stories file. So if your component, your React component looks like this, you have your button props, which is the color of the button, the background color, the label, and whether it's disabled or not. And you have your TSX, which is just some simple TSX that I made here, with just background color, disable the props, you pass the props in. What your story for that will look like? You will have to export the default, your button, your component, and then you could create a template for all the stories you're going to make. And in that template, you're going to pass the components with its props, which are arguments now. And then the primary is the first story that you will write. So you bind the template and then you pass the arguments that you want to use. So for example, in my primary story, I want my button to look a little bit red. I want to have a label and the button I want to say click me, and I don't want it to be disabled. So when I fire up my local server by running npm run storybook, this will show up. So I will have my button and I will have a canvas here because this is how it's called. Actually, let's see this live, I think. Wait, let's see this live. Let's see if this live demo will work. They never do today. I'll give it a, okay. Perfect. So let's go to where do I have my browser? Here. No. I go to localhost 4400 and I make this a lot bigger. Give me a second. Oops. Wait. So this this here, as you can see, we have the arguments, the color label disabled. So now I have my button, which has a color, a label, and it's disabled, and it looks like this. And I can click it, and it's a live element, as you can see. And I just needed to start the local Storybook server. I didn't have to fire my whole application. And now, what's cool about this is that I can change the colors and everything live, right? So if I want a green button, I can go like this, and I can change the text. And I can say that I want it to be disabled. And I'm not sure that you can see because the text is very small, but also as I'm changing these controls here, not only is the UI and my component changing, but also the URL is changing, which is pretty cool because Storybook integrates with Cypress, and you can trigger different states of components using the URL. And when you pass it into Cypress, you can make sure you have your retweet tests, use your Storybook components in your stories. So you get to write less retweet tests as well. So let's continue now after this small, right? Okay. So we saw these screenshots. And the step 4 is that you can build Storybook as a static web application, and you can deploy it just as we saw in the Guardian website, where they have built their Storybook and they have it published as a web application. So you can do that and share it with your organization or whoever you want. And to build it, you just run npm run build Storybook. So what is NX that I've been talking about on and on? NX is an open source tool, first of all, and it's a suite of powerful, extensible dev tools to help you architect, test, and build at any scale, integrating seamlessly with modern technologies and libraries, while providing a robust CLI, caching, dependency management, and more. So what does this mean? Let's see. First of all, NX offers the NX CLI. The NX CLI will help you generate apps. It will help you test the maps, run them, or organize them. You get commands like the create NX workspace, which will just generate a workspace for you. And in that workspace, you can generate applications, you can generate libraries, and you can import and export. You can export these applications and build them, but you can also import each application into the other. So it also works as a good monorepo tool. Sorry. So if you're familiar with the Angular CLI, some of these may sound familiar to you, but it's much more than that. The other thing that NX does, it has a lot of tools. First of all, it provides you with the dependency graph. What NX does is it analyzes your code base and it recognizes the dependencies between your applications. In that way, it provides you with a dependency graph. And this is useful because when you get to never build or test the same code twice, because it only rebuilds or retests applications that are dependent on each other. I wish the dog would stop barking. Also, it has the affected commands, which also by analyzing your code base exactly with the dependency graph, it only rebuilds and retests the affected code. We also provide a number of executors, which means that some scripts that you get to run, for example, to migrate code. So if you want, it makes upgrading from one version to another very easy, not only for NX, but for other applications or for Storybook as well, but even for Angular or for React. If you're going from one version to the other, there are some scripts called migrators that are run automatically. And not only do they update automatically your dependencies, but they also may change actual code that you wrote in order to adjust to the version that you're targeting. Also, it has integration with Prettier. Also, it has some generators. Generators mean that generate code that helps you move things around and change your organization. You get to run commands simultaneously. And also, it provides you, and we will see that in the final demo, with a plugin for VS Code called NX Console, that you can do all these things, not using the CLI, but using a graphical user interface. Also, it offers a lot of plugins with third-party tools like Storybook, as I said, or like Cypress. So as I said, it integrates also with Jest, with Cypress, with Prettier, with ESLint, and with Storybook. The generators that we talked about, there's a generator for anything you want to generate, like you can generate applications, you can generate libraries, components, you can generate tests, but you can also create your own generator. So for example, if you have a custom way that you're writing components or libraries in your organization, you can create a script and then run it through the NX CLI to create your own generator, basically. Also, it provides you with workflow management. You can add all the tools you need and use them from within NX. And you can organize your tests, your builds, and your CI. And also, we offer the NX Cloud, which the great thing about NX Cloud is you can expand. So I didn't mention the NX cache. So the NX cache is the results of each command that you run. And this is how the affected commands work, because if you have some cached results, and nothing is affected, it will fetch the results from the cache. NX Cloud takes that one step further. So it basically saves the results of your commands to the cloud, the NX Cloud. And if your whole team uses the NX Cloud, if any of your team members has already built or tested the same code actually, NX will use the results to speed up the command instead of rebuilding and retesting everything from scratch. So now it's not only your machine's power and your machine's cost that is used, but it's also other people's commands and work that is used. So how does NX help with Storybook development? Everything we talked about, let's bring it together. I think the most important things that NX will do for you is that, first of all, it will create stories for you. So if you want, as you saw, we just wrote a story where we imported the React component and we took the props and we adjusted some things and we added some inputs to the props. So what NX will do for you is it will take your component, it will analyze the code, and if it's Angular, it will understand your imports, or if it's React, it will understand your props. And based on that, it will create a sample story for you with some default values or some sample values for you. So it will write the code for you so you won't have to do anything. So if you want to get started with Storybook and use it in your application, it will just do the work for you. And this is very, very useful, for example, because if you're in a large organization and you don't really care to write complicated stories and you just want to generate a list and like catalog of your components, you can just run the NX command and it will just analyze the code and generate the stories for you, and you will have already Storybook to publish or to share. Also, another cool thing is that you can manage the Storybook through the NX ecosystem. So we saw before that you manage Storybook with Storybook CLI, but if you use it through NX, you will just have to use one CLI. You will have to only use the NX CLI. And this is not only cool because you will only have to remember one type of command, the NX command, but it will also add the Storybook to use the cache and use the affected commands and the dependency graph, which are all very helpful. So yeah, I talked about the cache. Also, it will generate T2E tests for your stories, which is very handy because it's not only T2E tests for your stories, it's actually T2E tests for your components. So if you have stories for your components, NX will just generate the T2E tests and they will be there ready for you to use them. What's more, because there's always more, as I said, it's an integrated environment for all your commands, and it has a seamless instant integration with your CI, and you can use NX to build. You can use NX build to build your storybook, so you can take advantage of the cache and the affected commands. So it's everything integrated. Also, it works for both applications and your libraries. And in NX, it works only for Angular and React. And also, we have active maintenance and support. We're working very closely with the Storybook core team. So we're up to date with any updates they're making in their code and any updates they're making in the way they write in their syntaxes. So we mainly stay on top of all the changes that are there. So in order to use it in an NX workspace, and if none of you is familiar with NX, I really hope you try it out. You just do yarn add and you add the normal storybook package. And then you just, for example, if you're using React, you would just do NX normal React storybook configuration and then give you the project name that you want to use. And we'll quickly navigate an NX workspace after that. So that's, those of you who are not familiar with NX will understand what I'm talking about. So this script that NX provides will install the required dependencies. They will set up the necessary scripts to run on build storybook. They will add the default storybook configuration. So up to there, they sort of mostly do what the Storybook CLI would do as well. But NX will also generate stories for your components, as I said, and it will add the scripts to your workspace configuration files to help you serve and build Storybook within the NX ecosystem. So again, this the component that we saw before, it will analyze this component and it will spit out this story that we saw before. And then you have commands like the stories command, which it will generate stories for the components in your project that do not already have stories. Also, it will update any stories for your components that have changed. So for example, if you have a component and you generate a story for it, and then you change your component and you run the stories generator again, it will update that story for you. And the NX build storybook command, it will build your storybook and it will take advantage of cache and the dependency graph and the affected functionalities. And then, for example, this migrator, if somebody were using Storybook version 5, this migrator would go and migrate all the configurations to Storybook version 6. We similarly have a migrator that would actually migrate actual stories files from version 6 to version 6.3, for example, so that you would have to do minimal work manually. So let's spend a few minutes to see this in action. So we saw this in action. So now let's see it. What we're going to see now in action is, wait. So we have this component here that we have already seen, but let's see how we can use the NX console in order to generate a new application and then generate a component for it and then add storybooks for it. So if you're using VS Code, you can add the NX console plugin. And here are all the commands that are available. So when I click generate, I want to generate, for example, a React application. So let's name my application JS Monthly. Oops. Wait. This is a dry run, by the way. JS Monthly. And I want the style to be a CSS, just for the fun of it. And then you have some other options that you may use. And I'll leave you to see this on your own time when you install the NX console plugin. But when I click run, you will see in the console here that it went and created a new application for me. And here are all my new changes. So it generates an application, and it also generates an e2e application. So in my new application, I do have one default component, but I want to generate also a new component for my application. So if I go and generate a React component, what will we name the component? Let's name the component London. My imagination is limited, as you can see. And I want the styles to be a CSS. And when I click run, it will go in here and it will generate a London component. And in the London components, if I add some props, Katerina is a string, and Malone, who is my cat, is a number. So welcome to London. Hi. Props. Katerina. Stay for props. Malone. Days. Okay. So now we have this component here. And now say I want to generate a storybook configuration for this application, this component. So if I go again to the Annex console and click generate, and they say storybook configuration, the project name was JS Monthly. And I wanted to configure Cypress, to run the Cypress configure generator, which will generate the Cypress stories for me. And I want to generate some Cypress specs and also generate stories for my components. And now if I click run, it will go in here and it will add the stories file, which, as we saw, imports the component and has two arguments here, Malone and Katerina. And it also has a storybook folder in it because these are some default storybook configuration files that need to exist in every storybook. So if I go to my, and it also generated the stories file for my default component. Let's remove this. So if I go here, yeah, it doesn't have props. There's always something that's breaking. I guess if I do like this, okay. Yeah, whatever. I just wanted to run. So now all I care about is this template here. So now if I run, if I add a name here, say Katerina again, sorry for this, and stay for 10 days. And if I go again to my Annex console and I go to JS Monthly here and I open it, I see that I can run Storybook for it. And when I click this, come on. Okay, it runs at my local server. And if I open it here, I have my name here that will change and I will stay for 20 days. So yes, we saw that with the next, we just clicked a number of buttons, clicked like 10 buttons and everything props up and you have a ready-made application and a ready-made storybook for you. And we also have some ready-made E2E tests for us, which the E2E test, let's see how they look like. In the London. So the E2E tests for London, they would look like this. And because we saw that the URL takes in the parameters, we can add different things here. different values to our parameters here and run the A/B tests and make sure that, for example, we would want our paragraph to contain whatever we put in the arguments here. And it would save us a lot of time. So let me go back to the presentation. So to wrap up quickly, I really hope you were excited by this presentation. So by this demo, actually, the presentation, the demo. So to sum up, Storybook helps you create a catalog for your components, to put it simply. But not only that. Storybook also helps you quickly test out various states and scenarios in isolation. NX helps you use Storybook by integrating with this tool system. And NX helps you use Storybook by generating stories for you. Yeah, these feature steps for NX are a bit outdated, but the thing that we always want is to add more migration and customization schematics. And we're already always addressing bugs and keeping up to date with new Storybook versions. So some links that you may find useful are the links for NX and for Storybook. And I'll give you now the links to my slides, which you can open, and you will find all the links that you need that are in this application. And that was it.